Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to talk about the potential lessons which Labour could learn about public approval from the ham-fisted attempts to govern from Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak in particular. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So before I go over the sort of dour topic of urging Labour not to mess up in government, please, it's worth pointing out just how expectations have changed. A viewer commented on the channel this weekend that they went back to my 2019 videos from just after the election, where I was, in their words, dooming about how the Tories had shut Labour out for a generation and how the best we could hope for in 2024 would be a slim Tory majority. And that was the outlook. The Labour Party was completely shattered. Activists had lost hearts. And when that happens, you lose your ground troops and it all gets harder. To win a majority of one, Labour needed to win more seats, more new seats than had ever happened in British parliamentary history. And it's an ancient parliamentary history. It is much longer than most nations today have even existed. You know, Keir Starmer said he was going to win the next election. It's like, well, you know, you've got to say that, haven't you? You've got to be up for the fight no matter how bad the odds. So I wouldn't expect anything less. Otherwise, you're just really not the right person for the job. But I did feel a bit sorry for him. I thought, you know, you're Neil Kinnock, aren't you? You're basically the next Neil Kinnock. His job would be to resurrect the party, but how could he win the election? Much less win a majority large enough to govern. Yes, Boris Johnson was bound to shit the bed. But I imagined the Tories would replace him with someone more credible before long. Yes, the hard Brexit was going to bite the Tories on the arse too. Didn't know about COVID or the war in Ukraine at the time. But I did not, in my wildest dreams, imagine this. Even a year and a half ago, I was excited to be looking ahead to a hung parliament, a minority Labour government. It was better than nothing. And now look where we are. We're even looking at Labour having a real chance to take Mid-Bedfordshire in 2 weeks' time. Never in a million years should Labour even be eyeing up a seat like that, even in a by-election. But not only are they challenging, they are the bookies' firm favourites to take it. Not firm enough to be certain, of course, but still. And polling which shows that Labour could end up with not just a majority, but a majority of 1997 proportions, and that's without taking tactical voting into account. It's absolutely incredible, stunning. Seems churlish for me to wag my finger at what might come next, but as epic as this recovery is, it's still important to keep it going. Like, we have to think about not just removing the Tories from government, keeping them out. You know, if the Conservatives ever wish to form a government in the future, it must be the ones who want to govern. So one of the political challenges, especially for an opposition party trying to form a government, is presenting policies to the public which sound like exactly the sort of policies that enough people can get behind to give you a majority without dividing them all on the methods. Because there are more than enough voters who will agree on outcomes like an effective NHS, getting rid of the waiting lists, or good quality schooling, buildings that don't fall down, cheap and efficient transport links, having access to water without having to pay the price of raw sewage in the rivers. But talk about how you intend to deliver on the outcomes. Suddenly people, you know, you'll find that some voters approve of this. Oh, yes, this makes sense. And there's other ones who are going, oh, no, I'm not sure about that. Either because they simply don't like the method, or they don't believe it will deliver the outcome which they do approve of. As a result, the ideal political campaign is heavy on detail when it comes to the outcomes, you know, the results, what you can all enjoy, and very light on the detail of how you achieve those outcomes. The outcomes unite people, the methods divide them. Yet there's no way of getting through an election campaign without being asked about the methods. Because you'll be asked how you're going to achieve these aims, especially for the Labour Party. But the only certain rule when it comes to delivering in government is that you must satisfy the voters that they got what they voted for. If you want to win the following election as well, and that is paramount. You know, this may go some way to explaining why until 20 years ago, Labour could never win a second term in office. The price was considered too high for what value they brought. So when Labour are pursuing their outcomes using methods which won't meet with universal approval, perhaps even without much approval at all, how can they make sure they keep voters on side? Well, the first way, of course, would be to make sure that they can point to improvements on a regular basis. Like, too often people call for Labour to do things where you won't notice the benefits for 20 years, but you will notice the costs immediately. You can't do that. You know, people have to be able to feel the benefits before the election, preferably as soon as possible. Labour, ideally, after a year, need to go, right, you can feel this is better, yeah? And people go, yeah, this is better. And then do that every year until the election. Once people feel the benefits, they care less about the methods. But Labour can also learn lessons from Johnson and Sunak. You know, probably less so from Truss, because the only lesson she had for her successors was don't announce unfunded tax cuts. I don't think any other potential Prime Minister was ever planning on. Both Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have broken manifesto promises. Some they got away with, some not so much. For all of Johnson's criticism of Sunak abandoning HS2, let us not forget it was him who cancelled the Leeds leg long before his position became untenable. As for Sunak, for all the talk of honouring the pension triple lock this year, despite not being entirely sure how he's going to pay for it, let us not forget he reneged on the triple lock already. The manifesto promised to maintain the triple lock. It wasn't to maintain it in most years, it was to maintain it throughout the Parliament. The promise has already been broken. Yet Sunak is not going to suffer political fallout because that was earlier in the parliamentary cycle and the current focus is on maintaining it now. But he's also broken a promise in a more permanent way by scrapping another leg and a half of HS2. Big announcement. So big that it's impossible for even casual observers to be unaware that Sunak is breaking a manifesto promise as what many are calling an unelected Prime Minister. Certainly has no public mandate for it. You know, what this is doing, whether Sunak recognises it or not, is preventing anyone being able to trust his other promises. When the election campaign begins and the Tories publish their manifesto, Labour need only remind voters of the long list of broken manifesto promises from 2019 and then ask the public, which Tory manifesto promises do you believe they'll honour? How can you possibly answer that you will believe Rishi Sunak after all he's done without looking like a complete mug? Labour will need to learn from this. Come the following election, when Labour have been in government and as they prepare their manifesto for re-election, it will be essential that their voters feel that they have not only delivered on their previous manifesto promises, certainly the important ones, but that they did so without the unexpected costs. For their part, the Tories and their client media will try to poke at every gap. If they feel something wasn't delivered, they'll amplify it. If they think that if they can get people to devalue what was achieved by pointing out trade-offs or costs, they'll amplify that as well. When talking about the following election, possibly in 2028, I often talk about the need for Labour to deliver and for that delivery to be very visible to the voters. But ultimately what I'm talking about is faith. In government, Labour get to show that they can achieve things. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, their promises are no longer hypothetical. They're implemented and making people's lives better. That is helpful for the following election because the Tories cannot paint them as an unknown risk. In fact, the Tories become the unknown risk. But it also means that what's delivered may not be what people expected. Really important that voters don't feel shortchanged by what Labour deliver. And this is one reason why, despite people calling for Labour to hype up their reforms, the leadership is sticking to the line of under-promising and over-delivering. Right now, they don't have to hype up their offer. They're on for a big election win without it. Why risk the hype turning into disappointment 4 or 5 years later when Labour present their 2028 manifesto? It's not enough that it contains policies that will appeal to voters. It did that in 2019. Those voters must have faith that not only can Labour deliver them, but that they will deliver them. And I do hope that Labour's leadership team are conscious of this and have learned lessons from the political munchkins that have been presiding over the government recently, for both what the voters will forgive you for and what they won't. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.